This is Walter Simonson, and you are listening to Across the Bifrost.
Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Across the Bifrost, the Mighty Thor podcast, where on each and every episode, we explore the world of Marvel's Mighty Thor. I am your host, Ryan Doze, and this is a big one, guys. Like, we've had many big ones. We've had many big ones this year. This might be the biggest one. So, Faz, I'm going to let you take credit and take the ball here to introduce our very special guest.
So, listeners, this is someone that Ryan and I have wanted to talk to for a long time. It's somebody whose books we've spent a lot of issues and a lot of recordings of the podcast talking about. I'm talking about the all-father of all fathers, one of the preeminent Thor writers, and from what we can tell, an all-around pretty cool guy. We have Mr. Walt Simonson here today. Walt, how's it going today?
It's going just fine. I hope I don't screw up during the interview. I hope I remember enough about Thor. That was a long time ago, but I'll see what I can do.
That's awesome. Now, listeners, just so you guys know, I managed to run into Walt at a Comic-Con a few weeks ago, and Ryan and I figured I should shoot him a message, see what he plug the podcast, see whatever happens. And to our surprise, he was actually willing to spend some time with us. So we are extremely fortunate for this, and we'll have to see if he is tired of us by the time that we've bothered him about this character that he's been working on and now reworking on, which we'll get to a bit later, on a different style of the Norse character. Now,
hold on, Vaz. I love that you said I ran into him somewhere. Can you just tell listeners how far you drove from where you live?
Oh man,
to this Comic-Con?
You're embarrassing me. All right, so I finished work at 5 p.m. from my little town, and we drove 10 and a half hours to beautiful downtown Uncasville, Connecticut, in order to go to the Terrificon, which by all accounts was a terrific con. I accomplished what I needed to accomplish in that I got there early and I hung out in a sketch line and I got to meet the man himself. And now, again, he's stuck talking to us on this. So yeah, it was well worth the drive.
And I'm happy to be here. You have to tell me, did you get a Thor sketch? And if you got one, with or without the beard?
So it was with the beard, and I don't know if you remember this. It was, you drew the version of Thor that I actually had
all right.
on.
I remember
Yeah.
Yep.
This is also just for me personally. I had a lot of things that I wanted to say, some things I wanted to ask, and in the moment I completely choked both times, both in the signature line and in the...
It was pretty busy. There was a pretty good sized line.
Yeah.
A lot of folks that wanted to stop by and say hi. So it would have been probably tougher to have had an actual conversation at that time.
Definitely, yeah. It was, some people took a lot of your time, some people took very little. I wanted to make sure I took as little as I could so enough people could meet you, because a lot of people were like me and drove in, right? So it was great. It was a great con, but this will be a chance to actually ask you the things that Ryan and I have been wondering since we've been going through the Simonson saga.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so right from the beginning, Mr. Simonson, what are some of the first
memories?
First,
call me Walt or Walter.
Okay,
I thought we were going to get that.
Okay, just so we know.
I was waiting for it. I forgot to ask in the early part. That sounds good. So, Walt, what are some of your first memories of comics and superheroes?
First comics. It's funny. I just posted something about this on Facebook. My wife and I moved recently. And when you move, we have a lot of stuff. We were in the old house for 36 and a half years. We accumulated a great deal of stuff. I will say mostly I accumulated it. Wheezy does not collect as much stuff as I do. But you find stuff in the move that you haven't seen in a long time. And one of the things that I saw was I found several little booklets, little spiral bound booklets that I don't know if you have them. If either of you guys ever had this, I don't know if they even do them anymore. I go back a long way. It's like in the 50s. You got your photographs taken at school. So you knew in advance, you got your hair combed, you wore a nice shirt, whatever you did. And I think I may have gone, I don't know if it went all the way into high school or not. I can't remember. But it did happen in elementary school, at least for 4 years, probably all 6 years of elementary school. And you get photographs, and then your parents buy a few sheets or whatever they have, and you trade them with your friends. They have a little spiral bound book that comes along with the photos, and it has, a space in little pages, my teacher, my pal, my best friend, other than classmates, and so on and so on. You trade them off with friends. And I found several of those, and one of them contained a photograph of one of my best friends of the time. His name was Jay Langeninger, and when we were 10 years old or a little older, probably 10, he developed leukemia. And at the time, that was really a death sentence, which it was in his case. And he was ill for about 6 months and died in September, just after I turned 11. It seemed like 6 months seemed a long time to me. Looking back at it, 6 months is like that. It just flies past. And he had transfusions and all the stuff they gave kids back in those days who had leukemia, mostly without really affecting the long-term outcome. But Jay and I, we took piano lessons from his mom. We were drawing buddies. We built plastic models. We read comics. We did a lot of stuff together. I just discovered he was a Little League pitcher. I was not in the Little League. I did not remember that. But he had a bunch of comics in his room. I had a bunch of comics at my house, and we would just read them. And back in the, it wasn't for collecting. Back then, we were too young. We were, 8, 9, and younger. And one of the comics that he had, which it took me decades to find out what comic it was. I remembered one story in it that was called El Fuego is the bad guy. And it was a sort of a set in a Zorro-like Southern Alta, California. It was kind of a romance but El Fuego, the flame, was a bad guy instead of a good guy. Wore a rather Zorro-like outfit, except it was green and red, a mask over his entire head that was red, had a green outfit, one of those broad-brimmed hats like Zorro, also green. And I won't give you the whole, I could give you the story now. I'm not going to do it. But I remember the story vividly, or fairly vividly, as much as you're going to read it. It turns out when I tracked the comic down, thanks, I must say, to Kurt Busiek, who I got hunted for it and talked to people about it for years. And finally, I don't know, 20 years ago now, maybe 15 years ago, I put a post up on Facebook and said, if anybody can identify this comic book, I'll do them a drawing. And I put out the plot as much as I knew. And within less than 24 hours, Kurt Busiek got back to it. Sounds like, what was it? All-Star Western? Sounds like it's a Don Caballero story.
Okay.
So I went to D.C. I looked in there. They allowed me to go to the library. Alan Ashman let me in the library. I went to the library, got the All-Star Western comics, and I believe, I got to check now, it was All-Star Western 60. And It turned out there were 4 stories in it. One of them was fabulously drawn. I did not remember it at all. It was by Alex Toth. So, of course, it was great. And the Don Caballero story was there. And it wasn't badly drawn, but it was very much, it turned out the comic came out in 51. So I would have been about 5, maybe 6, when Jay had that comic. I assume his parents were buying him comics. We were all reading pretty early. And the story, I remember the story pretty clearly. What I did not remember at all is the front. It's drawn like a 1940s comics, fairly small panels, not a lot of cinematic visualization to the story. And it turned out the front, the splash page is signed Eli. And Eli is Gil Kane.
No way.
So I looked at it. Once I saw it, I went, holy cow, really? Gil did this? I did not find it when Gil was still alive. If I had, I would have told him.
That would have been so cool.
And most of it I would not have been able to do. And if you'd handed it to me blind, well, not blindfold, obviously, but just with a blind looking test, I wouldn't have figured out who it was, I don't think. But there were a couple of heads, knowing it was Gil. They weren't up the nose shots that Gil did all the time, but they were just straight, like 3/4 profile shots, very Gil Kane looking. So that really was, that's one of the first 2 comics I remember. The other was a comic, oddly enough, I don't remember comics I myself owned. The other was a comic one of my friends, Billy Gullett, owned, and it was an adaptation of John Carter of Mars. Adaptation of Princess of Mars. I think it was probably called A Princess of Mars, by Jesse Marsh, who was the Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan artist of the time. he did 3 of those adaptations. I only knew about the one that Billy had. That was my introduction to Edgar Rice Burroughs. And I haven't yet ever gone back. I should have done it before I got on this thing. I, again, looked up the date, but it's got to be back in that time somewhere. So those are probably the first 2 comics I remember having read. Superhero stuff, back then, I just read every comic I could get my hands on or could afford to buy, which was not that many, but a few. Comics were only a dime back then. My allowance is probably 25 cents. So, a couple of comics a week, if that.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the first superhero comic. I know that at one point I had, but no longer have, I had whatever issue of Superman or Action it was that introduced Supergirl. It's for her first appearance. And Metallo was the backup story. And like most good American boys, after I went to school, my mom threw out my comics.
Oh, no.
Of course, I didn't need them anymore. So I can't tell the number of times she apologized to me after that when things became what I began doing. And I had to tell her, Mom, that was your job. I'm perfectly fine with it. I didn't buy the comics to begin with in order to make money. They weren't, they were not investing quality stock that anybody had then. A few people probably, but not like 12, 13-year-old kids. So I did go back and bought, there were 2 comics that had disappeared. I went back and bought them. And they were both movie adaptations, as it happens. They were both drawn by Frank Thorne. And one of them was an adaptation of Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And one of them was an adaptation of the John Huston Moby Dick. And both those books were my introductions to those properties. And I loved them. There were things about both of them I thought of Frank's drawing that I just loved. So, and they weren't too expensive. At the time I was getting them, they were not too expensive. So I was able to go back and buy them and not spend if I'd gone back trying to buy the Superman comic, maybe not. I didn't want to mortgage my house for it. I did actually go back and buy those 2. And if I had to tell my mom, please don't apologize again. It's just fine.
It is kind of a funny anecdote. Like, hey, did you ever hear the story about when Walt Simonson's mom threw away the first appearance of Supergirl?
Yeah, well, I'm sure mine was not the only mother who did that. And probably a few fathers as well. For sure.
Definitely. Now, in terms of all that, with what you were reading, did you have any favorites? Like, was there a series that you couldn't help but grab all of them for growing up? Or do you just kind of get whatever you could get your hands on, try it all, and go from there?
Back then, it's whatever you could get your hands on. They were carried at drugstores. Occasionally, were 5 and dimes like Woolworths. There was a Woolworths? I think downtown had a Woolworths for a while. An old wooden floor, a spinner rack, but comics were distributed, either more irregularly or maybe not, but I didn't get to the store every week. It wasn't like I went over to the store every week to buy comics. I just bought them. I had the money, or I happened to be there and see them. And occasionally my mom would buy comics for me. If when we were on trips, for example, to my grandfather's farm in North Dakota, when we'd be there for 2 or 3 days, and then we'd hit the road. We had a lot of other relatives to visit in the Midwest. My parents are both from the Midwest. And Mom, I did not pick this up. Mom did a lot of pretty crafty things. And one of the things she would do, because we had a lot of cousins up there, my brother and I had a younger brother, we played with the cousins, had a great time. They were really, for as much as we saw them every couple of years, they were good friends. And so leaving would have been tough. So Mom would always have 2 or 3 comic books stashed away. And we got in the car to leave, she would hand us the comic books. And so as we drove away, we'd be immersed in the comics and forget to be sad about having to leave our friends. So it was very clever. But
your mom sounds like the coolest.
She was pretty cool. The thing is, at the time, I read everything that was out. This would be the 50s and early 60s. And that means I read, superhero comics so I could find them. Probably the one strip I remember reading and tried to find from time to time was the Adam Strange Mystery in Space. I like that one a lot. I like Carmine's drawing. I didn't know it was Carmine back then, but I like the strip. I like the science fiction aspects. From about 8th grade on, I read a lot of science fiction, all the old classic guys like Asimov and Heinlein and Lester Del Rey and all those guys. So I enjoyed that comic. But I read Superman. I read Batman. I read, there were a lot of comics based on TV shows, Sugarfoot, Cheyenne, Westerns that were on TV at the time, 77 Sunset Strip, another one that was on TV regularly. Another comic I did enjoy but couldn't find regularly was Tarzan, drawn by Jesse Marsh. And interesting, it had Jesse Marsh in the front, who I thought you were a really neat Tarzan. I understand Toth was a fan of his. I hope that's true. I hope he's not here to defend himself.
I was going to say.
There was a raw quality about his Tarzan that there were other guys who drew much more refined drawing than Jesse, but Jesse's stuff just went right to the gut. It kind of bypassed all the nuances of fine drawing and went right to a drawing that was a direct communication, maybe to wherever your primitive instincts are in your brain, wherever that's located. And as a bonus, they had a feature in the back, about 5 or 6 pages maybe, called Brothers of the Spear, which is about a white warrior and a black warrior in Africa. I think I haven't read in a long time, drawn by Russ Manning. So that was beautifully drawn, as you can imagine. And a few years ago, I think it was Dark Horse, published a couple of hardcovers of the old Brothers of the Spear material. So they published some Tarzans as well. I didn't buy most of those. I thought the hardcovers were a little pricey, so I didn't really buy them. I'm sorry, Dark Horse.
They couldn't cut you a deal. Good grief.
But those I did try to buy on a regular. I really liked the ones where we went to Paul Dodon and saw dinosaurs. By the time I was 10, I was a big dinosaur fan, so I enjoyed those a lot. But I read Classics Illustrated. I read there used to be comics that were the story of the FBI from Classics, and they would have a thing about how the FBI, probably somewhat fictional at this point, but how the FBI came to be formed. There were, one of my favorite comics from back then when I was 10 years old, there was a movie that came out, which I did not see until I was 24, 25, called The Land Unknown, which is actually a pretty decent hidden oasis in the Antarctic story with prehistoric survivals. So it was like dinosaurs and jungles all in a deep oasis hidden away in the Antarctic. And man finds out about it, and they send an expedition to go examine it. The expedition gets there. They get trapped there for a while. They do eventually get away, but they have a bunch of adventures while they're there. And the comic book, I found the comic. I never saw the movie then. The comic was drawn by Alex Toth. And I am thrilled to say I got a couple of pages of that job. So partly one of them thanks to Howard Chaykin. So I loved, and I liked dinosaurs by the time that came out. And it wasn't until much later I saw Jock Mahoney, Alexis Smith, I think, and I've forgotten who else is in the movie. But, and really, it's actually a pretty good story. It comes across very well in the comic. The movie's a little cheesy, but it's fun for me.
Cheesy movies are good as well. So by the way, you've mentioned, first of all, Alex Toth, you've already mentioned an all-time great that is, maybe not as widely known nowadays, but I have a few, just like a twofold question. When did you know personally that you wanted to get into comics? And then as you were getting into comics, who were some of those people that kind of you looked at, like those artists or those writers that you looked at in the earlier days of your career?
Well, I began drawing when I was somewhere around 4 years old. I was too young to remember it. My mom told me this much later. When I was 4, I got mono. And when you have mononucleosis, you're mostly really exhausted. It's like a white blood cell count excess. And you're really tired and you don't do much. And which I didn't. I just was I don't know about now, but back then there was nothing much for it. I think bed rest and eventually got over it, which is what I did. So in order to get me something to do, we didn't have a television when I was 4 years old. So pre-TV, pre-video games, they had books. They did have books when I was that age. But everything else that you would have now, cell phones, stuff you'd hand a kid to keep them occupied, none of that stuff existed. So my dad brought home paper from the office. They had paper that was 8.5 by 11. It was used. It had been mimeographed or dittoed printed on one side and then thrown out. So Dad would bring home a ream of this stuff. He eventually kept up in the attic, had a lot of it, and he put it in the desk down at his desk in the study. And he had one of those old, you wouldn't know what this is anymore. Nobody would really, but in one of the drawers, there's a series, it's a metal frame with a series of slots in it that are at a shallow angle. And each one holds a different kind of paper. So you have the front slot was the used paper. The backside was clean. My brother and I got to do whatever we wanted with that. We could draw on it. We could make water bombs. We could make pirate ships. We made hats. Whatever we wanted to do, that was our paper to play with. The rest of it was stuff like typewriter paper that my dad used for his manuscripts. He was a scientist. They had stuff back then called corrosible bond. Everybody who's in this audience was going, "Oh my God, I remember that." And you guys are like, "What the hell is he talking about?" And what that is, it was a kind of paper back when they had typewriters and no computers, that if you typed on it and you made a typo, you could run the roller up a little bit, bring the paper up, and you could erase this letter. It was in ink, but you could erase it and then roll it back down and retype that letter. And the paper was such that the ink wouldn't dry on the paper immediately. You were able to get it off easily. This is before there was whiteout. So some of the stuff that they had later didn't exist. But so they had carbon paper. Do you guys know what that is?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to explain that one then. All you young guys who are listening to this podcast,
Office Supplies 101 with Walt Simonson.
That's right. That's right. And other kinds of, I don't remember what he had, about 6, 7, 8 kinds of paper in these slots. So he brought home the paper. I was 4. We had a little table that had legs on it that would pop open, and you could lift the front up and put it at an angle. So I could sit in bed, put pillows behind my back, put the little table over my legs, and then have a slanted surface, like a drawing surface to work on. Yeah. And I began drawing pictures. And of course, when you're a mom and your child does something brilliant, you're like, wow, my kid's a genius. And then after a while, I quit drawing. I got better. I quit drawing. And mom was like, oh, well, that's too bad. But she was not the kind of mother who said, you will draw or else. It was just like, all right, well, he drew. I'm lying. I think I drew when I was about 2. I would draw pictures. I don't know what they looked like. I don't have any of those. then I quit doing it. And my mom said, oh, that's too bad. So what? Then when I was 4, then I got mono. Then I began drawing again. And then I never quit.
Okay.
So I drew from the time I was 4 years old on. The first, I read comics when I was pretty young. Obviously, I just wanted from 51. So the first comic I ever tried drawing, I had a book called From Then Till Now, like a little golden book type of book with a dinosaur on the cover and maybe a comet flying by. I don't remember. It wasn't the comet that killed the meteor that killed dinosaurs. I didn't know about that then, but it was what was then a Brontosaurus. And it was a history of life on Earth. So in a simple form for kids. So I'm not sure how accurate it would be now, but that's what it was then. So my first comic, it was on manila paper. It was 8.5 by 11, and I drew it. I colored it with crayon. I drew it in pencil, colored with crayon, and I put it in my dad's typewriter, and I typed each of the captions. So I didn't know lettering. I couldn't letter. I was too young to really letter much. So I got about a page and a half in before I ran out of gas. I said, okay, I'm done. The name of the comic, starting off with a kind of in a minor key, just trying to prove I could do it, was called The Origin of Life.
Oh my gosh.
That was my comic. So,
way to set the bar low.
Yeah, that's what I look back and go, wow, why not shoot for the moon or the
I was
star?
ambitious.
So I don't have those 2 pages. I wish I did, but and then I didn't really draw comics. I drew a lot of action. I haven't posted these on Facebook yet. One day I will. I don't know where they are now again, but in the move, I discovered a bunch of my old school notes, and all of them have tons of little figures climbing all over them. They're just a little spaceman that I would actually draw, climbing up paragraphs, running across the top of the top line, and then jumping off the other side and bouncing off ledges, pipe, and then getting down to the bottom. Handwriting, getting down to the bottom. So I drew a sense, kind of continuity of these figures, not quite flip books, but that kind of thing. And eventually, some years, I took a few art courses. I in like 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. I didn't like them. In art courses, you were required to do specific stuff. So it's paper mache sculptures, it's toothpick constructions, it's matching up papers and colors and mosaics you take out of magazines. stuff like that. I just wanted to draw. I did not want to do this other stuff. So I got B's in art. The only year I got an A, 8th grade, I had Mrs. Pope, Miss or Mrs., I do not remember. I'm sorry, Miss Pope. But she understood what I liked doing. And so she gave me my first lessons in 1, 2, and 3-point perspective, which I understood immediately. And then she let me draw in class. I don't remember what my drawings were. I don't remember seeing them either, but I got an A in that. She gave me an A in that class. But my experience in art classes wasn't great. I did end up taking drafting in 10th, 11th, and 12th grades rather than, say, drawing. Loved drafting. I had a little drafting in 8th grade. That was one of our classes in 8th grade, a third of a semester. I tried to be very good at it, visualizing items and drawing them up neatly and stuff like that. So my drafting classes in high school, that was my introduction to ink. I had not drawn anything with ink up to that point. We were required sophomore year, first class we took. We did 20 drawings over the 2 semesters, and we did 5 drawings a quarter. First 5 were in pencil. After that, it was all ink, using old bow compasses and bow pens, the drafting instruments of the time. And so I learned to do that. I was very good at that. So I had an older classman. He and I were kind of fighting for who was going to be the best. Usually Bill beat me out by a couple of points, which was really annoying. But nevertheless, it spurred me
Bill
to try and learn that stuff. And then when I was out of high school, I had discovered dinosaurs in 3rd grade. I saw Fantasia, the Disney animated film. Now any kid can turn TV on, stream dinosaurs from anything. Back then, dinosaurs on TV or anywhere in the theaters were relatively rare, and because they were expensive, if it was stop motion or animation or whatever it was. So I saw Fantasia. The dinosaur sequence blew my brains out, and I decided I wanted to be a paleontologist and study dinosaurs. I went to college. While I was in college, I was a geology major. I took one art course, a watercolor course. It was okay. I learned some stuff, but again, not my forte. But at the end of my senior year, I decided, I'd been a geology major. I'd done a senior thesis in paleontology. I decided not to go on. I thought, this is not what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. However that works out, I could see that was going to be true. And since the only other thing I knew or liked was drawing, besides dinosaurs, I took a year off. I moved back home. I'm sure my parents were thrilled. You don't think about that stuff when you're young. So I moved back home. I worked in a bookstore, and I applied to schools. I applied to art schools. So eventually, I was accepted at the Rhode Island School of Design as a transfer student. So I went there as a sophomore, and by that time, when I was in college originally, I went to Amherst College up in Massachusetts. And when I was there, 2 things happened my freshman year. Well, one in the freshman year, one in the summer. The freshman year, I had a second semester English teacher, William E. Coles, who discovered my love of science fiction and related, not that much fantasy out at the time. So he loaned me his copies of The Lord of the Rings. At that time, they were not in paperback. They were just in hardcovers. He had a British edition. He loaned it to me. He said, read 100 pages. If after 100 pages you're not interested, this book isn't for you. Well, at the end of 100 pages, there was no way I was putting that book down.
Yeah.
So I read it, and then that summer, this would be 65, 65. I read The Lord of the Rings right around spring break in 65. And then that summer in 65, I was back home, for a summer vacation. I hadn't gone back to school yet. And I would go with my folks shopping, doing stuff. Went to what was called a drug fair. Doesn't exist anymore. It was a chain of drugstores around the Washington, D.C. area. I went to the drug fair with my mom out in Beltsville, and I have checked. It's no longer there. And I found they had a large rack of comics. It wasn't a spinner rack, more like a magazine rack, just a wide rack with lots of stuff, including a lot of comics. And there, I discovered Journey to Mystery 120, which was the beginning of what turned out to be a 4-part story. The only 4-part story Stan and Jack did in their run on Thor. And it was the beginning of Loki and the Absorbing Man trying to overthrow Odin in Asgard.
Yes.
Now, I'd seen a Thor comic my freshman year. One of my friends, Dan Goldman, who was one of my classmates, wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence that became a bestseller. So Dan's doing a lot better than I am. But he was a friend then, and they had a copy of Journey to the Mystery. I think it was 113. It's the Gray Gargoyle's Return. He'd been around.
Okay.
The Gray. Didn't matter. It was a one-issue story, a one-off. I'd read that. I thought, wow, this is really cool. And by that time, my parents had a book on Norse mythology I'd read as a child, an adult book on the myths, and I loved Norse mythology. Whether it's because my grandparents came from my dad's side, came from Norway, and it's genetic, or whether they're just really cool stories, I'm not prepared to say. I have no idea. But I love
both.
Discovering a comic book about Thor was awesome. And despite the fact he had blonde hair instead of red hair, he wasn't wearing iron gauntlets, he didn't have a goat chariot, all that, I didn't care. I thought it was really cool. But just one comic, we just lying around. I read it, liked it. That was the end of it. That summer, 6 months later, I found, 7 months later, I found Journey to Mystery 120. And fortunately, I think it probably made a difference, 121 was also on the rack. Mostly in newsstands. When the new issue comes in, you take the old issue, you tear off the logo, you send it back for credit. And of course, you sell the comic cheaply to some kid without a logo on it, but you're supposed to trash them. That was the plan in the old days. But it meant that I could read the first 2 parts of this story. So I read them, I loved them, but then I went back to college. And I couldn't find any comic books there. Eventually I did. There was a tobacco shop, Augie's Tobacco Shop in Amherst, Massachusetts, also long gone. And they had like a double or triple spinner rack, large spinner rack. And I checked it from time to time, looking for issue 122 and never found it. Now, 121 ends with Thor the Absorbing Man deep in a fight. And in the middle of this fight, at the end of the issue, this little kid you've never seen before, you never see her again. She runs out into the street. And Thor, being the guy he is, goes, "Oh my goodness," or he says, "Buy my troth," or whatever he says. He grabs the kid and sets her on the sidewalk to get her harm's way. And the Absorbing Man, of course, fires his ball and hits Thor right in the back of the head and clocks him and knocks him down, knocks him out down to the ground. Maybe kills him. It's not clear. And the Absorbing Man puts his arms up and said, "Ha ha, I've defeated Thor. Only someone as strong as Thor could have defeated him," or something like that. And I hadn't read a lot of continued comics. Back when I was a kid, comics were not continued. DC stories largely were, Mickey Mouse stories in the back of Walt Disney Comics and stories. By the way, I became a giant Carl Barks fan when I was reading Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge in the 50s. But the Mickey Mouse story continued. Mostly they were not. So I freaked out. Oh my God, Thor's dead, or at least he's dead. How's this going to happen? What can they possibly do? So I wrote Marvel Comics a letter, which fortunately I do not have a copy of, because I hate to see a semi-grown man plead. But I wrote them, I asked if I could buy a copy of Journey to Mystery 122. I explained what the situation was. I said, what happened? And then one day I found issue 124 at Augie's Tobacco Shop. And it was the end of the story. And in fact, the end of the story was so right after 122. I thought, so what the hell happened in 123? It's like I could just go right from one to the other. What went on? So, but I got to the end of the story anyway. And then one day, a few weeks later, a manila envelope shows up, postmarked New York City. I open it up, sent to me at Amherst. I open it up. It's a pristine copy of Thor, of Journey to Mystery 122. There's a little card inside, a little blue card, pre-printed, that says "Dear," in the pre-printing in like handwriting. But I mean, it's "Dear." It's printed. It says "Dear blank. Thanks for letting us hear from you. Stan and the gang," or something like that. And somebody had written in, "Dear Walt," and at the bottom, "Hope you enjoy the comic." Maybe that's where it said "Stan and the gang." I don't remember, but I flipped out. So I became an instant Marvel fan for life. Yeah. And no matter how much they try to make me not a fan, so far it hasn't worked. I don't read a lot of comics anymore, but I honor what Marvel was at that time. And I carefully stapled that card into the comic book. Collectors all over the world are wincing right now, but that's okay. I still have the comic. I still have the card. And because of that,
so cool.
Many, many years later, after I was in comics, I'd gotten into comics professionally. I was working at Marvel, which is 10 years into my career. This is probably 20 or 30 years into my career. I went into the office one day with that comic. And Flo Steinberg, who had been kind of Stan's Girl Friday and a real mainstay of Marvel in the very early days. And then she had left, and then she had done a lot of stuff editing, I think, art magazines, a lot of really cool stuff. And then she came back to Marvel. I think as a proofreader, maybe other stuff, I don't know, but she was back at Marvel. And I got to know Flo. And so one day it occurred to me, so I brought the comic book in, and I showed her the card and the handwriting, and she said, "Oh, yeah, that's my writing." And it was great. So really, I was able to identify it. I couldn't thank her enough for sending it to me. And as much as Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and Russ Manning and Jesse Marsh and all the other guys had to do something with my getting into comics professionally, Flo Steinberg's right in that list. And probably closer to the top than anywhere else. So that's it's a long-winded. My stories are always long-winded. You'll probably have time to ask 3 questions, maybe. It'll be done. So
Guys, you better hurry then.
Yeah, you better pick it up. So when I was at, this is a funny story. I found this story out recently. I have a good friend from Amherst. I was there, David Glass. David was I've lost your major, David. I forgot. He was a music guy, played the piano, very musical, really bright, like really bright. I was just there. I was lucky to be there. David was not lucky to be there. He deserved to be there. And one of the years, it was actually my junior year, I painted. We had 4 roommates, had a big social dorm room. We had 4 separate bedrooms, and we shared a common room. It was a large room with a big giant picture windows facing up toward the quad and a common bathroom. And we are good buddies of mine I was roommates with. So we went out, I don't know how we even did this, went out and got a 4x8 sheet of masonite. And I got white primer of some kind. I painted the whole thing white. And then I got red and blue enamel paint and possibly black paint or heavy, it must have been paint rather than magic marker. But I took a Ditko Spider-Man and I basically copied it life-size onto the masonite. He's swinging on a web. I curved the left leg too much, but Ditko had these curvy legs and I was just exaggerating that. But we hung it up on the wall. You could see it from walking down from the quad right through our window. And that hung on and I don't know where it is now. It's long gone. But it hung on our wall for many years. And David came by one time to get whatever it was he needed from me, a book or something like that. He told me the story at one of the reunions about 5 years ago. And he came in and he saw this Spider-Man on the wall and says, "Wow, where'd you get that?" And I said, "I painted it." And he said, "Okay, where did you really get it?" I said, No, I painted it." "Come on.
Hey, buddy.
Where's it from?" No, I painted it. I did it. He looked at it. He looked at me and said, "Why are you a geology major?" So he clearly understood much better than I did myself where I was heading. So, and I had a friend in high school, actually. Bob was a good buddy, no longer with us, but he told his wife, whom he got married right around just out of high school, somewhere in there. He has gone. We became friends on Facebook before he was gone. And she told me that at some point after when they were dating, maybe after high school, but he had one of the yearbooks. I learned not to sign yearbooks. Everybody says roses are red, violets are blue. High school was great, and so were you. That kind of crap. I couldn't do it. So what I did was I drew dinosaurs in everybody's yearbook. I just did a ballpoint pen drawing of dinosaurs in each yearbook that I was asked to sign. And in Bob's, because she sent me a scan of it or a photograph of it, there's a big shot of our high school, double page front of the high school. I drew a kind of a dragon dinosaur crawling up over the high school, coming up from behind it and reaching over the roof. And it was a large, not quite a Godzilla-sized dinosaur, but pretty big. So, and Bob told his wife that I was going to be going to be an artist. Whatever I ended up doing, he was sure art was going to have some part in it. And at that time, I had no clue.
Everybody knew but you at that point, eh?
Everybody knew but me. So
Why
when
are
I went
you
to
a geology
RISD,
major?
actually at Amherst, I had done 3 or 4 little bits of comics. The first one I did, when Ditko left Doctor Strange, it was a story in which Eternity and Dormammu faced off against each other. Dormammu attacked Eternity and blows up inside of it. Everything kind of goes to hell. And Doctor Strange gets saved by the Ancient One. I can't remember my own stories from like 3 weeks ago. I can remember this thing from 60 years back or whatever. Well, 50 years back. So but it was a half the comic. That was back when Doctor Strange shared the comic with S.H.I.E.L.D., I think.
Yeah, Nick Fury.
Nick Fury. And so I thought the story was too short. For as cosmic as this whole event was, it needed to be longer. So I began drawing the longer version. I picked it up from one point in the story and started adding my stuff. And I got about 4 pages done. They're inked with it. And I just did them 8.5 by 11. I didn't know comics were drawn bigger than comic size. So I drew them 8.5 by 11. I inked with a Pentel because hadn't really, I just needed to ink it. I didn't really need to get it. I didn't know about regular pens and brushes. I knew about drafting instruments, but that's quite different. So I drew 4 pages. It's the worst Stan Lee-isms you've ever heard in your life. It is so involuted and so convoluted and so awful. But I wrote dialogue for it. And then 4 pages, I ran out of gas. Okay, I'm done. Those I do have. 1 or 2 of them are up on Facebook. So, and then a year later, I did Iron Man, my favorite, Thor, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and let me see who else. I'm missing somebody. Thor, Iron Man. Oh, the Fantastic Four. Those are my 4 favorite Marvel books. Although I got to say, awesome. Doctor Strange should probably be in there somewhere of that time. And so, having done that, somewhere in there, the year later, Iron Man faces off against Titanium Man. Titanium Man's my favorite Iron Man villain from that era. I did love his suit, and I loved the way Gene Colan drew him in his second appearance. So I began drawing my own fight between Iron Man and Titanium Man. I drew a couple of pages, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5, a page or 2 more than my previous time. Didn't have any dialogue. By that time, I thought, well, that dialogue really sucked. I'm not doing that. So I plotted it. I didn't include any words. And then a year or 2 later, it was in Amherst, I think it was the senior year, I did about 7 or 8 or 9 pages of Enemy Ace. I had come to love Enemy Ace, a Joe Kubert feature over at DC, based on Baron von Richthofen and World War I Ace. And it was kind of a version of that, a fictional version of that kind of stuff. So, or inspired by, wasn't a fictional version of his life, but it was very romantic in the deep sense of romance, in the big sense of romance. And I really loved it. And Joe's drawing was just spectacular. It was fantastic. So I drew about 7 or 8 pages of that. Several years later, I went back and finished it up by drawing some 4 or 5 quick pages, but they're not really up to what I did to begin with. And they were pretty surreal in some way, with some very surreal stuff. There's a shot of, maybe it might be on Facebook. I have these pages too. There's a shot of Hans von Hammer, the Hammer of Hell, Enemy Ace, looking back on his triplane, and there's this figure of death riding the tail of his triplane, like an omen. He's not going to survive this particular battle. He did survive it, so death was faking him out. This was just funning him. So there was stuff like that.
That was funny.
So then when I got to RISD, by that time I had come up, I also, since I liked Thor, I had come up with a Thor story at Amherst, 67, 68. And I had drawn about, when I was at RISD, I drew about 30 pages of it. My original plan was to have it run through all the Marvel comics, and then in the same month, and then a month later, the annual would come out, which was like 40 pages long. So the climax could be in a longer story than the regular 20-page, 22-page issues. So I began drawing the climax. By that time, I was using ink. I was inking with rapidographs, technical pens that don't have any line weight variation. So you'd have to kind of draw the line and then fill it in some in order to make it thick and thin, the way a Croco pen or a brush will just do automatically. So I did maybe more than 30 pages of that. And then I ran out of gas. I thought, man, I don't like not crazy about the inking. I'll come back to this story later when I've learned how to ink better. 14 years later, I'm working at Marvel. Mark Grunwald asks me if I want to take over writing and drawing Thor. At the time, I had written maybe 10 stories. I'd written 4 issues of Battlestar Galactica, of my first writing in comics. I had written a graphic novel of the Star Slammers, 64 pages. That's 3 more issues. So that's 7. And I had written the three-part adaptation of Raiders of the Lost Ark that John Buscema penciled. So I had done about 10 issues. So I was really a novice writer when Mark asked. But we had talked about Thor, and I had described what I had done with him in this annual I had kind of drawn myself. I still have that too. And there's a few pages that are up on Facebook. So for those, a quick plug, I have a personal page on Facebook. I only friend people I know by and large on that page. Or if you're a comic book professional, I will, if I can figure it out, I'll friend you. But I also have a page called the official Walter Simonson page, which is as much of a website as I have anywhere on the web. And anybody can find it, if you're on Facebook, and you can like it, and you can see all the stuff. And I have a couple dozen galleries of tons of stuff, including one that just says old stuff. And that goes back to 3rd grade. So from 3rd grade on, there's stuff up to the mid-70s. So
we'll put a link in the episode description so people can go look at it.
Okay. So what happened was when Mark asked me, I was delighted. I thought, oh, man, and the book wasn't the great part. The book wasn't selling very well at the time.
No, it was not.
So my feeling was, all right, great. If I do this book and it tanks, no one's going to blame me. But if it does well, they'll all say, wow, that's Simonson. What a genius.
What a genius.
So that was how it worked out. So I've been faking people out ever since. So I decided that story I'd come up with in 67, that's the story I did. The whole Surtur saga is based on the story I wrote in 67. There's a lot of other, I had to expand it in order to make it. I was going to try and end up at issue 350, a nice round number. I didn't. It lapped. I'm like Frank. When Frank does stories, he always says, yeah, I'm doing a 60-page story of whatever this is. And then he'll talk to me like, well, now it's 90 pages. Well, now it's 110. And whatever he's starting off with, it just expands to fill whatever the story needs he has. This is Frank Miller I'm talking about.
I was going to say, what Frank are we talking about?
10 years ago. So that's what happened to me. My story got longer and longer and wrapped up around issue 353, I think. But I created a bunch of stuff for that story to work. So Beta Ray Bill, that was not something I came up with back in 1967. That was a character I came up with when I was given the book to do. And then the other story is Elaf, the Lost Warrior. A lot of that stuff was stuff building up to getting to Surtur. And Malekith the Accursed, and some of the Accursed himself, other stuff. That was all stuff I invented. The Dark Elves. I did a lot of reading when I was doing Thor. And I had a bunch of books. I still have a big library of not only Norse myths, but also Celtic fairy faith, a lot of Northern European folk and fairy tales.
There's a lot of fae stuff in your run. Sorry? I was just saying there is a lot of fae stuff in your runs. That makes perfect sense.
There was a woman named Kathleen Briggs. She's no longer around, so she won't be able to yell at me. But she wrote several books kind of popular books on the fairy faith and stories of the Northern Europe, England, stuff like that. I think she was English. And I'm going to say Kathleen, but I could be wrong. You can find and you can dub my voice in, and I'll give you both pronunciations. Just dub my voice in for her name. So, but she had very cool stories. And one of them, there was a story about a little girl who got involved with the people of peace, which is what you refer to. You never call the fairies by their names. You don't want to offend them. So they're called the people of peace, or maybe other names as well. And this little girl got involved with them, and her name was Malakin. And I liked the name, so I changed her to Malekith, and that's where the name Malekith the Accursed came from. I liked Mal, M-A-L, because it means bad or evil or whatever in whatever language it comes in, Latin or whatever it's from. The root word for mal, or sick, ill. I think in French, mal may be sickness. So it had the right feeling for a bad guy's name. So, well, now we're talking about Thor. So that's where a lot of that stuff came from. Well, I did a lot of reading. I invented a lot of stuff. The book itself is, I don't know if it would be equal parts, but it's probably it's an admixture of Marvel mythology, which I knew pretty well at the time. I haven't really read the book since I left it, and that's a million years ago, so I don't know where they're at now. But the Marvel mythology back then, my own thoughts about Norse myths and how to do it, and then the Norse myths themselves. And it's really an admixture of principally of those three things.
Awesome. And then in terms of the Beta Ray Bill stuff, was that kind of, you wanted an equal to Thor, you wanted to give him a big change when you were coming on, or how did that come about?
Oh, well, unfortunately, I'm sorry. Facebook got rid of they used to have, you could write long essays about stuff and post them, and they got rid of that aspect, trying to be more like Twitter. Fuck you guys. So you can bleep that if you want.
No. This is very much an explicit podcast.
1,000% leaving that in.
It was one of the things that made Facebook different from places like Twitter. I mean, I know that's, Facebook became only for your grandparents. Well, I'm a grandparent now, so I'm good. That's a place for me to be. But it meant you could write these essays. And I had several essays on there that went away, which I was sorry to see. I probably have copies of them. But one of them was about the origin of Beta Ray Bill, because I do get asked about that sometimes. And the short form, I'll try to make this short. The short form is that, Bill, I wanted to do a story when I began my run in the book that had not been told before. Now, Thor had been around for about 20 years when I started it, literally from 61, 62, 63, whatever the first year of Thor was. You guys would know that. I don't remember, but one of those years. And I began it in 83. So that's an awful lot of stories on a monthly basis plus annuals that had already been told about Thor. And I did not want to at least start off feeling like, oh yeah, it's another revisit of Loki, or another revisit of the Absorbing Man, or another revisit of the Grey Gargoyle, or another revisit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I should say, and the Cobra. I'd like to do something that readers have not read before. They may not like it. They may think, whatever happened to the Cobra? Why isn't he in this book?
What happened to the Cobra?
But I wanted to do something, one of the great lame villains of all time.
I was going to say.
So I love him and Mr. Hyde. That was awesome. So I love a lot of old lame comics. So I thought about it, and it occurred to me that really something that had never been done in the book, sort of, is somebody else picks up Thor's hammer. I mean, it has the inscription, "Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." And no one ever has. So that's why I figure after 20 years, nobody in the Marvel Universe really could. Now, I will say that I knew if I did a story like that, I'd be opening the genie's bottle.
Yeah.
And after that, but I've had people blame me for it. Well, fuck you guys too. So I did my story. I found my
ringtone, Faz.
I liked it, and I'm not responsible for all the lamos who came after me and decided this is my favorite character. I'm going to have him pick up Thor's hammer. If I ran the world in Marvel Comics, nobody else would ever have done it. The only character in comics I would think could maybe pick it up, and I'm not sure, honestly, is Wonder Woman. Not only because of her gods, but she's a warrior. I know Kurt had Superman pick it up. I love Kurt dearly. He found that comic for me I'd always looked for. He was wrong. Now, when you have him on your podcast, he can say, Walt Simonson was wrong. That's okay. That'll be fine. That's what makes horse racing or something. But for me, the deal is that the hammer is, it was created in Norse myths as a weapon. It is the most powerful weapon in Norse mythology. And it's a weapon that Thor used to kill frost giants. It's the greatest weapon they have. He's their greatest warrior. And that, to me, means you've got to be willing to kill if you're going to hoist that hammer. And Superman's a lot of things, including incredibly strong and a really cool character. He has, at least in different comics, occasionally taken an oath not to kill anybody.
Yeah.
Now, whether that applies to every Superman story ever, I have no idea. I do remember that. Isn't it the very first Batman story where he's flying in an airplane and he goes, "Much as I hate to take human life, sometimes it's necessary." He's in an airplane machine gun. And
Batman kills a bunch of dudes early on.
But he's machine gunning a bunch of people. So, things change over time. I get it. But I just thought as a modern Superman, he seemed unlikely to me to be a guy that could pick up the hammer. I do understand the lure of having him do it. I get it. And my wife disagrees with me. She thinks Superman could pick up the hammer. So Yeah, we're still married.
Is that what you guys argue about at the house? Like,
Not at all.
I think Superman could uplift it. No, you're crazy. That can't happen.
No, it came up. It came up once somewhere. Somebody asked us about it, and we had different answers to crack this up. There was a TV show back in the '60s called The Avengers. No relation to Marvel. So Diana Rigg and John Steed, and Patrick McNee, Diana Rigg, two of my favorite actors, my favorite people. Diana Rigg just was the hottest thing on television and remains. She was every boy's babe at that time. She was great. And partly it's because she was incredibly sexy because she was so bright. She made intelligence sexy. And sometime later, there's a movie, an Avengers movie some years ago, which was, I saw a little of it. It was god awful. I did Ralph Fiennes and Uma Thurman, I think, were in it. And it was really terrible. I heard an interview with the director before it came out saying, oh yeah, Mrs. Peel's all about the cat suits. And I thought, boy, you have no idea what that show is about. But that being said, that interview was with Diana Rigg and McNee. I'm assuming it was about that same time. I don't really know. And somebody asked them, okay, did they ever sleep together? Because they had a great chemistry. And Diana Rigg's answer was, no, never. And Patrick McNee's answer was 5 times a day.
Oh,
I thought that was hysterical. So that's what Thor's hammer is like. I mean, everybody wants to have their own character pick it up as a touchstone to prove how worthy they are. But honestly, that doesn't mean as much now because everybody's done it. But it didn't stop me from doing the story. I thought it'd be effective in the story I wanted to do. And what that meant was I had to create a character that I thought was worthy of picking up the hammer. And to me, the fact the hammer had been around for 20 years in the Marvel Universe, the Hulk had tried to pick it up and had not been able to. Because you could argue he wasn't worthy. And other guys we hadn't seen Cap try to pick it up. Now, Mark Grunow, I think, had Cap pick up the hammer. I get it. Cap was one of his favorite characters. I think that's highly unlikely because Cap is too parochial. He represents a very specific viewpoint in the cultures of the world, the American viewpoint, whatever that is, which is not the Viking viewpoint. And so I don't think he could have done it. But that's just me. That's just me. So
I never thought of it from that angle, though.
Yeah.
Well, I try to kind of, since it's the Norse stuff, I try to go back and use that to some extent, not every extent, but to some extent to guide me in that. That's why Wonder Woman, as a goddess or semi-goddess or created out of a statue, whatever you want to call it, as a warrior woman, she might be able to do it. My only question, I have not resolved this. I don't think about this stuff when I'm on my vacation. I don't care. But I do comics when I'm doing comics. And otherwise, forget about it.
Right.
But in her case, one of the things about Wonder Woman is that she is enormous, at least to me, as a character, and she's been written a million different ways. She is enormously compassionate. And it means that if there's a problem, she would mostly try to get people together to solve it rather than just take a hammer and break everything. But she is a warrior, so I don't know the answer to that. My feeling is that different writers or different fans would have different ideas about how that would work. I don't know how, but because she's a warrior and related to the gods, I would give her at least a consideration. If I had to write that story, I don't know what I would write. But that's my thought about that. So Bill was designed from the ground up to be a worthy guy, a guy that already made enormous sacrifices, and a guy that was a warrior, that was designed essentially to be a killer, that fastened together his being with that of the worst carnivore on the planet to make him as mean and nasty and fight worthy of anybody in that race. And so that's what he was created to be. That's why that's why I used him to pick up Thor's hammer.
One of the other things about your run that's kind of unique, and every Thor writer to a degree has had to resolve this question is Thor going to be king of Asgard? Is he going to be like top of the heap there? Or is he not going to be? And you have a point, obviously, where Odin is off the table and you didn't make Thor king. So I'm just kind of curious, what went into the decision to not make Thor king? And what, like, story-wise, did that, how was that resolved in your mind?
Well, he made Balder king.
Right.
So the thing about Thor, Odin is a god of rich people, or the Jarls, as it were, and and Asgard. And Thor was always in the myths more a god of the common man, of ordinary folk, and a guardian of Midgard. So if he's being king in Asgard, he can't do that. He can't do what he loves doing and what he's really good at. So I've decided that and if he's king, he's going to have a lot more links tying him to Asgard that would be more difficult to get him loose from in order to go have an adventure. Whereas if he's not the king, yes, sometimes not being the top guy gives you a lot more freedom. When you're the top guy, you don't always have the freedom that you have when you're a couple steps below that or a step below that. So that was never an issue. I did have a story lined up to bring Odin back. Never happened. And I don't know, I'll probably never do it. I mostly don't tell those stories. I think I'm not going to because I don't want, the time might come, probably at this stage of my life career, probably it never will. And they brought out, Tom DeFalco brought Odin back 3 seconds after he began doing the book, or however long it took him. Not very long, I'm sure. But I did have a way of bringing him back. I'll keep that. I'm actually on we'll talk about Ragnarok a little later on, but when I was doing Ragnarok, I had an idea for what should have been the third Alien movie. Because I drew the adaptation for the first Alien film. Archie Good wrote it, and after the second one, I came up with I thought should be the third one. It was not the third one. Nobody called me up and said, "Walt, what's your idea for movie number 3?" And you couldn't do it now. There's too much water over the dam. But I came up with it. Well, I'm going to use that idea in Ragnarok 4.
Son of a bitch.
It could be, 30, 40 years to 79, 89, 99, 2009, 2009. Yeah, 40 years or a little less, maybe about that, to get around to going, okay, I can use this idea here. I keep track of all my old ideas because I have a lot more than I'll ever get done in my lifetime. But you never know what's going to be useful. So the reason the Thor frog happened is I had a note in my Thor notes. I had a bunch of Thor notes. Some were complete plots. Some were short bits. One was a sentence. Tip of the hat to Carl Barks. Big Carl Barks fan, big Donald Duck fan. Initially, I was going to make Thor a duck, but I thought, that's not going to work because there's already Howard the Duck in the Marvel Universe. There's Daffy Duck. There's Donald Duck. There's like ducks everywhere. So I'm not doing that. And in fairy tales, the handsome prince gets turned into a frog most of the time.
True.
So I said a frog, and one of Carl Barks' stories, a Donald Duck story. I don't remember the name of it now, but it's about the greatest hero who ever visited Duckburg. His name was Catapult, and he was a frog. I did not use the name in my story, obviously, but I got to a point, I came across that note, I got to a point in my stories where I thought, I can make this work. I can do this. So that's where the frog story came from. Just a single sentence I had in my notes about the possibilities. So you never know what's going to actually be fertile ground for ideas. And that's why this idea I had for Alien, a variation of it will be showing up in the 4th Ragnarok arc when I get around to it. Well, actually, I'll get around to it pretty soon, right? In fact.
I was going to say, they announced it. You've got to get around to it now.
When we go off the air, I'll tell you what it is. But we're not going to do it here.
I love that Walt thinks about Alien like I think about Alien. What would I do in an Alien movie? Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Walt, one thing I had on this list that I definitely didn't want to let you go without talking about was my favorite issue of Thor is the what I call the "Oops, all splash pages" issue of it's one of the 2 books I have of yours that are framed up in my office. It's that, and I have the second appearance of Beta Ray Bill, and the only reason that one's up there is because I don't have the first. So the Oops All Splash Pages issue is one of my favorites, just because of the epicness and the grandness of it. Was that it's very different than the other issues in your run. So why do an all splash pages issue? I mean, it was actually a part 2 of a 2-part story with Fing Fang and Foom, but Fing Fang and Foom is actually the Midgard serpent. So why do all splash pages for that one?
Well, the problem with that, I was coming up to, I was a few issues away before I worked that out, was in trying to think what I wanted to do with it. As a writer, I'm always giving myself these damn problems where I have to draw some really small object and some really big object. It's like Thor versus the Midgard serpent, who's big enough to encircle the world, or
Right.
up against Galactus, or I mean, it's not just me; it's Stan and Jack had it too. But there are several times when I'll do stuff like that, and I'll have a scale problem. And the scale problem is you can't get any bigger than your comic book page, and you can do 4 or 5 panels, or 6 panels, or in the case of Manhunter a million years ago, 15 panels on a page.
Right.
There are a lot of solutions, but I was worrying about that one before I got there. I knew I was going to do Thor and the Midgard Serpent, but I wanted to do it well. I wanted to do it dramatically, and I was concerned that if I were going to do 4 panel pages, let's say, I was going to have a big head of the serpent and a tiny figure of Thor, or I have a big Thor and the serpent either isn't in the panel or he's off over in the background a million miles away, or something like that. So the problem was a problem of scale, and I thought about it. About what then I wanted the fight to seem epic. So I one thing I thought of was, well, okay, so I'll do 2 or 3 pages of fight. Then I'll have some subplot, and I did a lot of subplots. I'll do a page of subplot, and I'll come back to the fight in a different stage. I do that 2 or 3 times. It'll make the fight seem longer than it actually is. You'll have this pause, your commercial break between sections, so it'll make it seem like it's longer. And I wasn't satisfied with that. I wasn't satisfied with a lot of that stuff, at least the solutions I had for it. So my wife and I used to live on the west side of Manhattan, on West 71st Street. There was a restaurant down around the corner on West 70th in Columbus that was a Mexican restaurant called the Cantina. And it was kind of your ranch stash standard, but really good Mexican restaurant. They had a great red snapper salsa verde that I loved, we'd go there and I have that. And we would go there at least once a week. And one day, it was in the summertime, maybe late summer, maybe or early, I don't remember, because we finished up our meal about 7:00. It was still light outside. And I can remember we were walking out of the restaurant, and I walked across the threshold of the restaurant, and it was, in fact, like having a light bulb go off above your head. That the cliche cartoon idea of having an idea appear above your head. I went, bing, and I went, oh, splash. And then I had to think about it somehow, how that would work, that we just walked around. I told Wheezy, I have to think about this. If I ever go home, I'm going to lose it. So we walked around 3 or 4 blocks in our neighborhood before we got back home, by which time I kind of worked out what I wanted to do and how it was going to work in the comic book. So that's where it came from. Now, I don't know that I could credit part of that maybe to John Byrne. I say maybe because I think by that time, John had drawn an all splash page issue of the Hulk when he was doing the Hulk. It had not been published. I think, I don't want to put words in John's mouth. He would have his own view of how this all happened. But I think the editor was not happy to not have been forewarned about what John was going to do. And in the end, they had a dispute about it. And I think John got off the book somewhere in there. I'm hoping I'm telling that correctly. Again, John may have a different view of how this worked. But it sat around on the shelf for a while. And eventually, Alan Milgram had that magazine, Marvel Fanfare, which he actually had a lot of stuff done for specifically. But they had that issue sitting around. And he said, I'd like to print this. And Marvel said, okay, sure. So that issue did run eventually in print in Marvel Fanfare. I had a chance to read it. But I had not seen it when I had the idea for doing an all splash page issue. I can't say that I think I may have known about John's issue, but not seen it. I'm not really sure. But I think I would give John at least partial credit for having the idea before I did. And I may very well have glommed onto that when I came up with the idea myself for what I wanted. So that's how.
Wow.
But,
wow. Thank you very much for telling me that.
Well, the other thing that I did do was I really wanted to draw it. And Sal Buscema by that time was drawing the comic.
Yeah.
I became a really good friend. And we had a great time together. I loved working with Sal. His brother John was a better draftsman. I don't think Sal would object to my saying that. But Sal was a really brilliant storyteller. If you go, I mean, John wasn't bad either, don't get me wrong. But if you go back and look at Sal's stuff about how the storytelling is done from panel to panel to panel, what he chooses to show you, what he chooses to do in backgrounds, what he chooses to sort of foreshadow, he's really, really good. So we had a great time in that book. But I got to that, this is like my third from the second to last issue that was 380. I got off at 382. And I spoke to Sal, told him what was coming up, and I asked if I could pencil that issue. I didn't want to go in there and just boot him off the book because he had a family, he was making a living. And we talked about it. And he was perfectly fine with it. So what I did was, if you look at the book, I'm credited with layouts. Now, back in those days, that was simpler than pencils. You might not spot the blacks or like lay them in, stuff didn't render up as much, but it's layouts. And whoever inks it's called a finisher. And the difference in that is that, page ranks weren't that high back in them days. But what it meant was the layout artist took $20 less than his pencil rate. And the finisher got $20 more than his inking rate. And so I'm credited with layouts in that book so that I took $20 less. Sal got $20 more. So I was taking a little less money from Sal than I would have been if I had been credited as a penciler. I did, in fact, pencil the book. They were pencils, they weren't layouts. But that meant that I wasn't taking as much money from Sal as I might have otherwise. So that's how that works. So that's really, and then at the end, the other story I tell people, and I'm sure I will offend modern Native Americans out there. I'm very sorry. This is just what I thought. As a kid, I had a book on Indians. And it covered Eastern Indians, Midwest, West, Seattle, all the stuff up in the Northwest, the big dugout canoes they made, that stuff. And it was a kid's book, illustrated, nicely illustrated, well drawn. I don't know who did it, but well drawn. And in it, they talk some about the Southwestern Indians, including the Navajo, and Navajo weaving, the rugs that they wove. Now, this is a story I got from that book. I've never found out whether it's true or not. So I can't really say for sure, yes, this happened. But one of the stories in there about the weaving is that the Navajos, when they wove a rug, would always put a mistake in the rug somewhere. I've told this story in another interview years ago. Yeah. They put a mistake in the rug. And they would do it because only the gods were permitted to create perfection. And the idea was that there's probably a mistake in this rug, but suppose there's not. Suppose by accident, I end up weaving a completely perfect rug. This will be an offense to the gods. Now, I don't know what the penalty would be, but the result was they put in a flaw in the rug somewhere. That's just to prevent that from happening. That's the story I got from this book. I don't have any idea if it's true. As an old guy, I kind of wonder about it now, but that was the story I got then. So I did the all splash page issues. I did two things. One, Jim Shooter, as he did a couple times when I was doing Thor overall, permitted me to do an extra 2 pages in the book. That was other people began doing that, and eventually Jim had to say, no, we can't do any more of this. Because what it meant was they had to drop the letters page, which he did not like. And they had to drop the bullpen page, which was the promotion for other comics at Marvel. So when I explained what I was going to do, in fact, I walked into Jim's office one day, nobody was in his office but him. I bopped in, I said, Jim, I've got this great idea. I'm going to be doing an all splash page issue of Thor. And he was cool with it. So eventually he let me do 2 extra. That story, I think, is 24 pages long.
It is, 22,
yeah. I think my first issue of Thor is 24 pages, or maybe 23. And there may be one other issue I did somewhere was 23. I don't remember anymore. But it was 24. And when I got to the end, the very last page is 4 panels, each horizontal panels, each one a little wider than the last, showing Thor's armor lying on the ground, presumably with Thor made of jello inside the armor after colliding with the Midgard serpent. And part of the reason for that is that that's the flaw in that book. That means it's not all splash pages. There's one page that isn't, and that's why.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
So I will say, I try to think about this stuff when I do it.
My next question doesn't really hold a candle to how cool that is. Walt, to pivot slightly over from the comics into what Marvel's been doing recently, what was your experience like seeing a lot of your ideas coming forward in the Thor movies, like with especially Ragnarok? Yeah, like were you consulted? I know you got to be there for the first Thor movie. What was kind of that experience like for you?
They didn't consult me in any of that stuff. I mean, that's why would they? I do comic books. They're doing movies that make billions of dollars. So, but they did. They called me up when the first movie was being done, filmed in California, and they asked if they could fly me out there to appear in the film. Now, they invited me and my wife and my editor, Ralph Macchio's in there too. But
cool.
You don't get a clear shot of Ralph. I think you can see the back of his head. That's about it. I'm sorry, Ralph. But and we figured they probably asked Wheezy if she would come as well, because I don't like to fly. I've gone through periods like right now where I don't fly. I may go back to flying again, but I don't at the moment. In 2018, I flew into Florence to go to Lucca in Italy, and we went through what they called a hurricane to get in. I don't know if that's what it really was. I don't think a hurricane's in it, but it was a really rough storm. We bounced all over the sky. It was really nerve-wracking. Wheezy loved it. I did not. and it was tough enough. So the captain came on as we were bouncing around like crazy to explain that the plane was designed to handle turbulence like this. Well, I've been in rough weather before. I've never had the captain come on and explain to us, no, we're going to be fine. So that was a measure of how tough it was. We had to land in Rome to refuel. We circled a long time in Florence. Couldn't land. The weather was too rough. So they landed in Rome, where the weather was still kind of rough, and refueled. And while we were there, even though they weren't supposed to, half the passengers got off.
Wow.
They said, okay, we're not flying this plane back to Florence. Now, I thought about it, but I thought, okay, if I do that, I'm going to be in Italy. I don't speak Italian. I'm going to have to find the train station. I'm going to have to find the train that goes to Florence. I'm going to have to get to Florence. There's somebody waiting for me at the airport right now, yada, 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 yada. So it was, we had a great time. Obviously, I got in safely. It all worked out fine, but it was pretty nerve-wracking. And since then, I may go back to flying.
I'll pass.
Right now, I'll pass. So we ended up, you know what I've done? I've done the old man thing. I've lost the question.
Okay.
That's good.
The question was about the Marvel movies and your experience with those. You weren't consulted, but they did want to fly you out. Yeah.
Well, we think that that was before the experience. I don't know what I would have done after Luca, but that was like 2011, I think, or thereabouts. Luca was 2018, so that was not an issue. But I still didn't like flying much, and it's very cool to be in the movie, and I'm very grateful to them for flying me out there, and Wheezy and Ralph. We had a great time. They treated us very well. It was really interesting to see how a movie was made. It actually made, even though I hear actors say other things, it made making movies look like it would be fun. So that was very cool. But we think they probably asked Wheezy, maybe not, but they may have asked her because they figured she would want to go. And if they just asked me by myself, I might say no. I might have said no. Movies are cool. I don't see a lot of movies. If we see 3 movies in a year, it's a lot for us. I watch some on TV. I like old, I watch TCM, although in our new house, we don't have TCM on cable. So I'm not seeing any. I haven't watched a movie in I don't know how long, quite a long time.
Wow.
But with Wheezy going, it was like, okay, I don't have a choice. I have to go. Wheezy wants to go. So we went, we had to get up, and we had a snow, it was in the wintertime. We had a snowfall. We lived at the top of a very steep driveway. Anybody who hears this, ever been to our old house, knows exactly how dangerous that driveway is. We were picked up at about 3:30 in the morning to be driven to Newark to pick up an early morning flight. And we had to walk down the driveway, which is very icy. We had to walk down in the snow berm on either side in order to not slip down the driveway and kill ourselves. And we didn't make it down the driveway. The guy drove us. He drove us through the middle of Newark, which is not the fastest way to get to the airport from our old house. We got there with 4 seconds to spare, and they were already loading the plane. Ralph, he came from a little closer to the airport than we were. He did not make the airplane. His driver did not get him there in time. He had to come on the next flight. So we got to California, and then so we're there in the morning, and then we were up all day getting our costumes. Well, I got my costume fitted. I was an Asgardian elder. They even had shoes. I mean, they had like all sorts of stuff. It was great. And then Kyle, I keep losing Kyle's last name. He's written some of the X-Men stuff. He was Kyle Craig. I think Craig is right. I hope it is.
Okay.
He was our principal minder. He's one of the something producers, whatever the prefix would be. And he was our principal. A lot of people looked after us. It was fine. But he, when he discovered that Wheezy was not going to be in the film, he said, "Oh no, we can't have that." So they whisked her off to makeup and wardrobe. They found a wardrobe for her. She had short hair at the time, a little short, not super short, a little short. And all the Asgardian women had metal lattice work things, to gussy up their hair. And a woman worked on Wheezy's hair, trying to get it to work. It was a little too short. Another woman came over to help out. And finally, the head hair makeup person came over. So, I've got a client I work on all the time who's got short hair. And so she worked it out and she got it all to work. We counted later. I've forgotten the exact number. We had something. There were something like 32 bobby pins in her hair to help.
Good grief.
So, but she got her costume, she got her makeup, and she's in the film. But I get a microsecond sitting next to Jamie Alexander, which was great because Jamie was a complete pistol. She was just great. And I have to say, she was so great. I thought, I'm sorry, why is Thor with Jane Foster?
Oh, no.
But I didn't mean that. Portman, she may have been great as well. But Jamie was, I think she had several brothers, maybe 4 brothers. She was a tomboy, and she was just a riot. And it was really interesting. So we ended up being in the film. Wheezy, I got a split second. We're laughing. Jamie, Sif and I are laughing. And she was on the end of the table. When you face the table, she was on the left end. I was next to her. There was a young woman who was an extra, a very pretty woman next to me, she and her husband were doing stuff down there as extras from San Francisco. And then there was Fandral, Hogan, and Volstagg. And then Wheezy was next to Volstagg. Oh. Ralph, either he was next to her or one of the Marvel execs from Florida had flown up so he could be in the movie. And I don't remember which side he and Ralph were on, but you never saw them very clearly. Wheezy, you mostly saw from the back or a slight side view, a little bit of a left profile or side, so you could see her a little bit. And at the very end, when Thor walks across the screen, going behind everybody, the camera follows him. He's in focus. All the people, the banquet folks are not. But Wheezy's there, cut off from about the nose down. So you can see her face and know what she looks like. There's Wheezy in this blurry shot. That was really it. I get one really clear shot. Jamie and I are laughing. And I don't think it's in the film. They originally had some dialogue with the Warriors 3, but the girl, I don't remember her name, the girl who played, I didn't meet her, she was the girl who played the Jane Foster's assistant, got better test results, so her part was expanded a bit, and the Warriors 3 was cut back. So, but there's a shot of me on the web about laughing like a loon. So, the reason doesn't show up in the movie. So, but it was really interesting. We had we were there 3 days, parts of 3 days, 1 day in, a day there all day, and then we went home the next day at late. But I got to lie in Odin's bed, minus a mattress. They'd already filmed the scene. So it was just a plywood base under, but the bed was still there. So I didn't get any photographs of me doing that, which was too bad. And we got to go into the big sphere that was Heimdall's energy squirter, when you get the Rainbow Bridge squirter, when you got the travel
energy squirter.
they were still building it, so it was only partly done, but it was neat to see how it was being done. We got to see them film the scene when the Warriors 3 and Thor and Loki, I think, and maybe Seth land in Jotunheim. They zip in. There's actually a bit, I don't think it was in the movie, where it's like the edge of the ice. It was all plywood. It was all this plywood cut up into various bits and then all painted white, and with a green curtains all around it for the expanded version and view. And Volstagg almost falls. It lands and almost falls off the the edge of the world at that point. I think Thor grabs him and hauls him back up. I don't think that's in the movie, but it was still fun. We got to watch a lot of that stuff, and it was really fun. It was very entertaining for us to see it. And as I said, they were very kind to us. Tom Hiddleston had enough personality for 12 people. Yeah. And he came over. He was talking to Wheezy, and there were some other folks there. I remember who else was there. There were 2 or 3 other folks at least. And he was demonstrating Loki's fighting style. They ended up talking. He said, here's how Loki, and what he was doing was he was doing this whole series of whirling maneuvers, which you'll never see because we're doing this as a podcast and not as a video. But it was all this whirling, and a knife would appear in a hand, and he would fire the knife, and then another knife would appear in the other hand. He would fire that one, and whirl, the knives kept appearing. A little bit of that, maybe a half second, is in the movie. We had worked out a whole fighting style for Loki. So he was great. I mean, they were all really nice to us, and we had a great time.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, everybody, we've been talking to sometimes Thor writer and artist, but really movie star Walt Simonson. We got to kind of wrap up our conversation. We want to do a few plugs for Walt's projects. But before we do that, we have a tradition on the show where we do a Thunder Round, which is a couple of get to know you questions that really aren't comic specific. And this is a Thunder Round named after what Jason Aaron gave us. He gave us some critiques, and I took it because he's Jason Aaron and I'm not. So we call it the Thunder Round, and can't believe I get to ask Walt Simonson these questions. So,
all right, Jason, if I stumble over these, you're in big trouble next time I see you.
Battle of the Thor writers. I love
That's
it.
That's right.
So yeah, but true. You guys live so rent free in my reading list that it's they just keep doing this forever. So Walt, the first question is, if you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Well, maybe flying, so I get over my fear of flying.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Okay. I get that.
Yeah. The next one, Walt, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, probably stupidity in people, but I'm not going to go any farther than that. There's a lot of stupidity running around in America right now, and I'm not going to go any further than that.
Well, luckily, Faz is in Canada. He's covered. He's covered. Hopefully none of that floats up north. What is your go-to snack or drink?
Well, I can't get these recently, and I don't want to get them too often. I'm doomed. Costco used to carry praline pecans. And they were pecans covered in praline coating, whatever dangerous. That is. And they come in these large jars. And they used to carry them right around Christmas. Since we've moved, we aren't close to Costco anymore, which is too bad. I mean, I don't miss as much as I used to. Costco years ago used to carry tons of DVDs when DVDs were a thing. And I got a lot of DVDs, including old series of TV shows and stuff that I liked, and for inexpensively. And then they also had a lot of books, and I found a lot of books there. They carry obviously no DVDs now, and very, very few books. So the stuff I like to go into Costco for is mostly gone. But the praline pecans were great. As it happened, I was back in my old neighborhood about a week ago, which is unusual. I haven't been back since we moved. And I stopped by Costco to get a bunch of stuff, just things we were running out of up here that I thought, I'll make one more round. I'm right there. And so I picked up a bunch of stuff, and I checked, and most of the nuts they carry used to have mixed nuts and pistachios they still had, cashews, a bunch of other stuff, and praline pecans. None of that stuff seemed to be there except for the pistachios. Everything else, and there were some mixed nuts. Not much. I don't know if they just weren't carrying them, or they occasionally move stuff around in the store so you can't find it, or you have to look more to see it. I never found them. Just as well, I'm trying to lose weight before the holidays, so it's okay. But I would go through a jar of that in 3 days. I would try not to keep eating them. I just walk by the kitchen and go, oh yeah, one more handful won't kill me. So yes, and I have to say, I love buttered popcorn.
Oh,
great choice. Yeah,
classic.
If you could have dinner with one comic person, dead or alive, who would it be?
I think this question implies that you haven't already had dinner with them.
Yeah, we have to start there.
Folks,
Yeah.
a lot of the older folks I have not had dinner with, and the guys that were the pioneers in the business, and then even generations ahead of me. Well, I'll name one. I have to say, well, I'm going to name two. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Want to be Jack Kirby? Want to be Carl Barks?
You really can't get better than that. I mean,
That's probably my two. I mean, there are plenty of other guys I'd love to have dinner with. I'd love to go back and have dinner with Sal Buscema again, just for old time's sake. But Jack and Carl be my first picks.
Just a quick follow up. Well, like we're recording this a day after what would have been, I believe, Mr. Kirby's like 107th birthday,
106th, 107th,
something like that. Yeah. I mean, along the road, did you get to meet him before his passing?
I did. We didn't have many conversations. I met him 2 or 3 times at conventions. Mostly got to shake his hand, how big a fan I was. Then I was kind of tongue tied after that. But
the Faz special right there.
Might have been the last time he was in New York. I don't know. Mark Evanier would know. But he came in New York. He was at one of the New York conventions down, I think, in the hotel across from Madison Square Garden. It's had about 6 names, and it's gone now, so I don't know what it was called then. And Jack came out of he might have been giving a panel talk. I don't remember. But he came out of it. I think that's probably what I came out of it. And we ended up chatting for about 10 minutes. I have no idea what we chatted about. Completely gone from my brain. I do know that somebody who was there took a photograph of us together. I have never seen that photograph. I have no idea who took the picture. I would love to have a copy, but I did have a chance to chat with him some. And I was just, even though I don't remember it, I was delighted to have that chance and tell him how much I admired his work and how influential it was on me.
What about Mr. Barks?
Never
did you ever get...
met him.
Oh, okay.
I would love to, but he lived to be 100. But I didn't. I mean, I didn't.
Feels like he was around forever.
I don't think he did a lot of conventions, and San Diego occasionally. I think some. I don't know how many times, but just it was never an overlap. I don't do San Diego very often, and it was never an overlap, so I never had the chance. I have friends who met him. I'm insanely jealous of them, but what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, two bona fide legends. And the last question of our Thunder Round: when you're not creating comics, what do you do for fun?
These days, probably nap.
We have the same hobbies. Awesome.
So, it seems to work. The older I get, the more I like that hobby. So one thing I used to do, I don't right now because we haven't got everything set up. I mean, we only got our TV set up about 3 weeks ago. So we were here for about 2 or 3 months, 2 months, 8 weeks, 9 weeks before we had a television back up here. I got to say, I didn't really miss it. I miss watching baseball. I enjoy watching baseball, but it wasn't the be all and end all of my existence not to have it. So what I did do in our old home is in 1986, we picked up the original Nintendo game platform. Cool. And we picked up The Adventures of Zelda, which came with it most of the time. And so I played Zelda on all the platforms up to the first one for the Wii. When they got to, what is it called? Not Call of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild. That one I have not played all the way through. I kind of ran out of gas on that one eventually. But I loved all the ones up. I didn't play the Game Boy versions. I played one of them, I think. But most that was just too small for me. It was like, I can't see what I'm doing here. So, but I love them. I play them all. I go back and play them. I'm like a rat in a maze. I'll go back and play them again. And occasionally I'll find something I've never seen before. Like, holy cow, where did this come from? And I try to have all the chats for everybody to see all the lines of dialogue in the entire game. My favorites probably remain Twilight Princess and what was it called? The Wind Waker. Wind Waker is maybe my favorite. I love the cell animation look, design of it. And I love that at the end of it, for those who don't play Zelda, the main bad guy's named Ganon or Ganondorf. And they have the same bad guy more or less in all of them. Not quite everyone, but I think he's not in the Mask of Majora, whatever it's pronounced. So, but in the Wind Waker, my favorite part of that, I love the writing in that one, besides the design work, which is spectacular. At the end of it, you face off against Ganon with Princess Zelda assisting you. So you have to kind of maneuver yourself so she can do what she has to do. But before the fight begins, they have a conversation. And in that conversation, you find out why Ganon is a bad guy.
Oh, cool. And
that's because when they talk, he talks about how he grew up it's where the bandits are. I've forgotten the name I haven't played it for a while now. The Gerudo Desert, where the wind, and it's the Wind Waker is the name of the game. So the wind brought I don't remember his exact words, but it was, boiling hot in the daytime. It was freezing cold at night. But once in a while, a wind would blow in from Hyrule that was moderate and wonderful. He doesn't use the word wonderful, I know that. But it was moderate and wonderful. And he just says, he stops and he says, I coveted that wind, I suppose. And there it is.
That's
so
cool.
Oh my God.
I thought that was, and they do it because it's all written and not spoken. It's like, I ... coveted that wind, I suppose. So they really use a little bit of expression in their printed captions. So, and the other thing I like is that when I was playing the first game, my grandson was young and he didn't read. We played Zelda. I played Zelda. He would watch. He loved watching it. But he was annoyed that he couldn't read the captions. Well, it turns out he is extremely good at language. So I believe, Nick, I hope I'm not telling this story incorrectly. I believe he learned to read partly so he could read the damn captions on Zelda.
Yeah. You pissed him off into learning how to be a great
That's
reader.
right.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And now he not only can he read the captions on Zelda, he can speak Japanese.
Cool.
He spent time in Japan, learned the language.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
I don't believe that's an easy language to learn.
No.
So he is a language guy. But that's what I would do is I played all the iterations. I'd go back and I'd play the very first one I kind of loved because it was so new at the time. Wheezy helped me out. We mapped out the entire world, quadrangle by quadrangle, as we went through it because you didn't have a map of the whole thing. And we burned or blew up every bush. We just did all the stuff you had to do to try and figure out where the hell things were. But I found that, when I play those games, I can put everything else on hold and just concentrate in a way that I can't do. I mean, I love reading and I'll read stuff, but I'm very rarely so immersed in what I'm reading that I'm not aware of stuff around me. Whereas in the video games, I really just get into it. And then even games I've played a million times. So if I've got a problem in a drawing I'm doing or a script I'm writing or whatever it might be, I like getting into that and putting the world aside. The only exception I will say for reading, and this will bring us right around to the beginning of the interview again. Oh, maybe this was maybe this was before we started recording. I don't know. I was talking about the Lord of the Rings and discovering the Lord of the Rings. I read over spring break, and the reason I know that is because I was in a bus just leaving Springfield, Massachusetts, to go back to Amherst after spring break, taking the train to Springfield from Maryland. I'd gotten over to the bus station. I got on the bus. We were heading out. We backed out and started going. This is a spoiler. If you haven't read The Lord of the Rings in the movies, this is a spoiler alert. Turn to your sound.
Tolkien only wrote it in the 40s or whatever.
Okay. So, it came out in 54 and 55. So,
okay, cool.
In the 40s, he was writing that whole time. So, I was reading whatever I was reading, the chapter, The Bridge at Khazad-dûm. And as the bus is pulling out and starting off again, Gandalf falls into the chasm.
Oh, man.
Khazad-dûm, off the bridge. And I just went, what? What? In the bus. So everybody in the bus kind of went, what?
Son of a bitch.
So, completely. So I was completely unaware of what was going on, except I went, holy sh. I don't think I said that, but I probably came close. So cracked me up. It was just really funny.
Oh
and
my God.
So I was pretty immersed in that book at that time.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was maybe the best thunder round we've ever done.
I don't know about that. One of the longer ones, I have a feeling.
let's talk about some more, maybe some more forward, in the future
Yeah, yeah.
things.
So the book I have in front of me, Walt, is Ragnarok Volume 3.
I recognize.
The Breaking of Helheim. So there's a pretty good artist that draws this, right? And a decent writer who writes
He's
it. Right?
okay.
So it was just announced recently that the story is finally continuing, and I've seen across social media, Reddit, and through the Facebook page that's made for Ragnarok, people are like, finally, what's happening next? I can't believe this is going. Can you tell the listeners that might not know what Ragnarok is, what
Sure.
this story is, and kind of what the next thing is that's happening without giving away anything that would...
I'll try to keep this one a little shorter than usual, but we'll see how that goes. 20 years ago or thereabouts, Scott Doomberry is a good buddy of mine, and it was an editor at Wildstorm at the time, maybe the editor-in-chief, before Wildstorm was probably DC, got a hold of me and said, you ought to do a book about the Norse myths, just your own book about the Norse myths. And I thought, wow, that's a cool idea. I'd love to. I got some work I'm finishing up. Let me get that done. I'll get back to you. 15 years later, I called him up and said, all right, I've done all the work I was doing. I'd like to do this book. So I don't know if I had the idea when I talked to him. I may have had the idea by the time I talked to Scott. I was thinking about it, and I didn't know how to approach it. I didn't want to do another superhero book exactly. I didn't want to just tell the Norse myth straight, because you can go to any bookstore in America or Canada and many other places and find volumes of the Norse myths, and you'll read all the stories, including one by Neil Gaiman now. So there's lots of that stuff out there. So I thought about it, and we used to have a bookstore here in the States called Borders, and they went bankrupt some years ago and are long gone now. But I was driving, I'd gone out, Weezy was off somewhere. I'd gone to our local pizza place. I'd gotten some pizza, hopped in the car, and I thought, I go to Borders. I got to look at books. So I zoomed off to Borders. I had to go right by our house to do that on the main road. So I'm zooming past it, and about a mile away from the house, that was the other time a light bulb went off. I went, Ragnarok has already happened.
Yeah.
I said, oh, crap. Because what that meant was, I have learned the hard way that if I have an idea and I don't write, I think, wow, this is the greatest idea since sliced bread. There's no way I'm not going to remember this 5 hours from now when I get back from having pizza, running and getting new shoes, buying a hat, and I'll get back to the house and I'll write. I get back to the house and go, damn it, it involved paper clips and pizza, and it's just gone. It's just gone. So I went, damn. So I never made it to Borders. I turned around, drove home, hopped on the computer, and I wrote for an hour. And by the time Weezy got home, and by the time I'd written for the hour, I had the basic idea for what Ragnarok was going to be. And the idea is that Ragnarok has already happened. For those who are listening who don't know what that is, in the Norse myths, the end of days is called Ragnarok. It's usually translated as Twilight of the Gods. I don't think that's a literal translation. I forget what it really is. I have looked it up a couple of times. I never remember. But essentially, it's when a series of events happens, and when they happen, it presages the beginning of the end. And in the end, the gods and their enemies gather on a great battle plain called Vigrid, which is 100 leagues in every direction, and they fight, and they kill each other. And basically, the world ends. The sun and the moon are eaten by giant wolves that have been pursuing them since the beginning of time. The earth sinks out of the ocean. The stars fall from the sky. This is the old idea like you have in Greece, where the ocean surrounds everything, sinks into the ocean, and everything goes dark. And then after a time, the earth rises back up, green once again. There's a deep woods on Earth. I've forgotten, it begins with an L. I've forgotten the name. But a man and a woman still have survived in the deep woods. And on Asgard, everything burned. At the end of when everything is destroyed, Surtur, who killed the god he was facing, Tyr, he has a flaming sword, and he fires flame over the entire world, all the worlds, and everything burns. Presumably he does too. He's never mentioned in the poetry again. But the poems aren't meant to be like comic book continuity, so who knows? But presumably he's dead. So everything comes back green again. The highest halls of Asgard did not burn. A few children of the gods are up there. They come down. So some of the gods are reestablished, different ones. but the children of the gods, mankind is reestablished. And at the very end, the last quatrain or couplet, I think it's a couplet, but it's in two steps or whatever they're called in poetry. A dragon rises up from somewhere with either corpse-like wings or corpses on the wings. I don't read Old Norse, so I can't give you, and so I've seen it translated different ways. But it rises up again. And there are other translations that suggest that that's not quite what it says. It's about the seeress telling Odin all this stuff, and she sinks down, the dragon sinks down, or maybe it's the seeress. But the idea presumably being that, as with the gods and humans, evil also enters the world again. And that's the end of the story. There was another story where Balder comes back from the dead, where he was in hell, to rule over the new gods. There's suggestions that's kind of a Christian add-on. I have no idea. I just know what the stories are. So, but I thought it'd be kind of cool. Ragnarok's already happened, but it hasn't finished yet. So what's happened is Thor has been, we discovered pretty early on, read the first issue, you'll find this out.
Yeah.
He's been imprisoned in a giant fortress at the end of the world, and chained to a stone throne. Ratatusk, who is a little squirrel that in the myths runs up and down the Yggdrasil, the world tree, Ratatusk has helped keep him alive. That's all I'll say. You can read the comic if you can find it. But kept him alive, but not as alive as he might like to be. So he no longer has a lower jaw. I have no idea what happened to it. I haven't worked that out yet.
I've read the letters. They always make me laugh. Everyone wants to know, and you always go, I don't even know. I can't tell you yet.
I don't know whether I'm going to bring it back. And that was my idea initially, was not to have it. I should have worn my Ragnarok shirt. Oh, well. Well, it doesn't matter. We're on camera anyway. But his hair is now white. So he doesn't have his red beard, he doesn't have his red hair. And he gets loose from the throne, and he breaks out of the castle, and he discovers this fortress, giant fortress. He discovers instantly, he's aware that the light is not changing. And this means the sun is not traveling across the sky. And that means things are different. He doesn't know what's happened. So the story of Ragnarok, presumably, as long as one god is alive, Ragnarok is not over. That's why the book is called Ragnarok. And he does eventually, he has his hammer. It works. And he has his iron gauntlets.
Yep.
And he goes out into the nine worlds. I will say this, the nine worlds, because of the way things have worked out, they have collapsed. So it's now one giant realm of the nine worlds. You can walk right from Midgard to Asgard to Jotunheim to Alfheim, wherever you want to go. It's a long walk. And Thor goes out to find out what's happened. And the nature of the series is that he finds out what's happened and then proposes to do something about it. He can't put the pieces back together. It's not that kind of a story. But the next arc, so I've done one arc that was called Last God Standing. That was where you kind of set up everything. It sets up what's going to happen in the series. These arcs are all 6 issues long. The second arc is called The Lord of the Dead. That's because Draugr walk the earth, the dead of the Norse lands. They're like the Norse zombies, the Draugr. And the Draugr walk, and they interfere with things going on. So a being has decided to marshal the Draugr into a great army and it's called the Dusklands is the new name for this whole area. And then the third chapter is the breaking of Helheim, which is the story of Hel itself, what happened to it, what happened to Hel herself, and what Thor can do about that. And the fourth episode is going to be called In the Realm of the Ice Giants, or it might be called Into the Realm of the Ice Giants. I'm still working on that. And that's because Thor goes to Jotunheim and discusses things with the Frost Giants.
Discusses.
Yes, creative discussion, of course.
So that's
He's known for his diplomacy skills.
Yeah, he's and he's going to be Mr. Diplomatic in this one. I'll tell you that. So that's and I've got, if I can manage to do this, I've probably got at least 3 more arcs beyond this. I have an ending in mind. I do have an end I want to get to, but I have at least 3 more arcs beyond this. Maybe, let me think for a second. Yeah, maybe 3 will do it.
Cool.
That may get me there. And the arc I'm about to do might end up being 7 issues instead of 6. Again, I haven't plotted everything out in detail yet, so I can't be sure. It was the first 3 were published through IDW. Scott Doombeer, who was the guy who talked to me about this a million years ago, went from Wildstorm. They got bought by DC, became a DC group editor, eventually left DC and became an editor at IDW, where Scott invented things like, helped invent things like the omnibuses and the artist editions and things like that. He's quite an original thinker about comics and how to present them. And so he has now left IDW, started his own company, Act 4, which is, if you count, that's his 4th company that he's at, which is why that's the name. And
Act 4, yeah.
So exactly who's going to publish Ragnarok and how is still up in the air. Scott will be editing it, however that works out. But then exactly how it'll be published or packaged, we're still figuring that stuff out. He's figuring that stuff out right now. It's really his call on how he wants to do this stuff. So I'm figuring on 6 or 7 issues worth of material, and then we'll see how that works out. But that'll be the next arc. And he wants to put out a collected edition of the first 3 arcs called what the hell was the name? The Connoisseur Edition.
Connoisseur Edition.
Yes,
yeah.
Ragnarok.
Connoisseur Edition.
Which cracks me up. So that would be a hardcover. And for that one, it'll be the first 3 arcs together. And then at the end, there'll be a coda, which will be a 6 or 8 page story that will essentially be something of a lead in to the following arc.
Awesome.
It won't give away the plot by any means. It's got some stuff in it that will become relevant in the next round, but that'll be in that book as well. Whether other drawings or not, I don't know. Again, the content hasn't been discussed in that much detail, so we'll just have to see.
Just like your buddy Frank, things just keep getting longer. You just keep adding pages.
Listen, I learned all I know from Frank. That's how it works. So that's fine with me.
You could definitely learn how to do comics from, so many worse people, I guess. Frank's a pretty great. I can't believe I'm using Frank Miller's name. Just like, oh yeah, Frank. He does comics. You probably heard of it. I
steal from Howard Chaykin. Howard's one of my best buds, so I steal from him as well.
I do love when you post pictures with Howard, and I know you posted pictures with so many people. I'm just like, just buddies making comics.
Well, I got one more picture I want to put up from Terrificon. I'll put up tonight, I think, where it's me and Howard and Dave Johnson does all the covers and other stuff, and a good buddy of ours, Thomas, who's not in comics, was a good friend of mine and Howard's especially. He knows Dave. We had a last dinner the Sunday night. There's I guess Bobby Flay has some kind of a hamburger joint at Mohegan Sun.
Oh,
and so we went there, and they were very good hamburgers. So we went there. So it wasn't one of these 12 people at dinner, just some old guys shooting the breeze and winding down. And it was and I've got a photograph that was taken there of the 4 of us. So I'll be putting that one up.
Awesome.
That'll be the end of my Terrificon story for this year.
Awesome.
Speaking of Terrificon, Faz, we should talk about Heroes Initiative.
Yes, that's a great segue, Ryan. Look at that. We're podcasting.
Well done.
We're doing here.
Well done.
So, Walt, one thing that I noticed at Terrificon, and something that I know is something that you always do when you go to these conventions and you meet all your fans, is everything that you do is for donations to Hero Initiative. Can you tell the listeners what that is, what it does, and then we will make sure that they have links so they can help if they feel.
They have a website that will fill everybody in. It was started many years ago now, at least 20, maybe longer. I don't know when the origin year was, but a bunch of folks got together and decided, especially in comics, as you know, here in America, we have a fabulous medical system for people. And we also have fabulous retirement plans for everybody. So somehow
there's too much money to go around.
There's so much money. There's a lot of money, but somehow it doesn't trickle down the way it's supposed to. So what happens is, what happens is there were a lot of artists who did comics in the old days. In fact, Hero Initiative's original name was Actor, which was a contribution to our roots, was the original name for it, which is a great acronym, but it's not an acronym that says comic books. And eventually it was decided by whomever that, we just can't keep using that because nobody hears that acronym and thinks comics. So they went to Hero Initiative, and that maybe it's not as great an acronym, but it tells the story better. But a lot of guys in the old days, I go back to where there were no royalties. They didn't come in until about 82, 83. So 82, I think. So a lot of guys worked for page rate, like guys like Jack Kirby, and Ditko, and everybody, all the guys back then, Kubert. And they worked for page rate. And when they got paid their page rate, that was the end of the money for that artwork. The artwork could then be reprinted a million times, and often was. It was sold overseas. And the people who created it, wrote it, and drew it did not get any additional funds out of that. It wasn't like TV where your show gets rebroadcast, you get a few bucks, at least initially. So the upshot is that several guys decided to form an organization that would raise money to help out people in the comic industry who were in need. And it's a broad brush. It could be as something as simple as, if simple is the right word, where you're having trouble making your rent. Mostly it's older guys, but it's not always older guys. Or you're having some kind of catastrophic medical problem. And, your insurance, if you have it, is not covering it. A lot of the older guys didn't have insurance. And it's anything like that we feel we can help with. I was not one of the original members. I don't remember who was on the board originally. One guy who was on the board to help found it was Dick Giordano, who was an editor and artist, or very well known and a major guy in the field. Dick died a number of years ago, and Hero Initiative reached out to me and Howard Chaykin because no one guy could fill Dick's shoes, and they reached out to the two of us to see if we would come on the board to help out, and both of us said sure. The board itself is divided into half. There are two halves. One raises money for the organization, and one helps distribute it. So if you're in comics and you're in trouble one way or another, you can get a hold of the Hero Initiative, and we will review your case. And if we think it merits it, we'll contribute money. Sometimes this is in the form of a loan. Sometimes it's a grant where you're not expected to pay it back. Sometimes we help keep some guys afloat for a while because they're trying to get back on their feet. Some guys, we have an end of life set up where guys who have, entered the Mystic don't have much money left. And so we help the families with burial expenses, which is a little grimmer, but still true and very helpful. So it's all that kind of stuff. I'm actually on the side of the board that gives the money away. But at conventions, I'm happy to have a Hero Initiative bucket and help raise money as well. So I play both sides against the middle, but I am one of those when they figure out, get a case. And there's a guy, Jim McLaughlin, who is, I think he's the one salary employee. There may be somebody else. I don't remember. But Jim is our filter. He is really good at it. He will go through everything. If you're having doctor's bills, he'll get a hold of the doctors, he'll check the bills, he'll vet the hospital reports, whatever needs to be done to make sure that whatever you're doing or need you actually have. And he's done a really wonderful job with that. So then once he's done, he'll send out notes to all of us on the giving money away side, listing the case, making a suggestion for, how much money. He'll bring it to a vote, basically. And then we all vote on it. And that's how it works. The website will tell you a good bit more about it. Well, it also has some testimonials, video testimonials from some of the folks that we've helped over the years. I've been doing it for at least 10 years now, maybe longer. I have to look up when Dick died, and then I'll have some idea how long I've been on. But it's really, it seems, especially in a profession where you don't have much of a safety net, especially the older guys. But what we've had, occasionally younger guys, you'll have some catastrophic health issue that will, develop suddenly, and it's hard to manage. And so we're happy to help out in that stuff too. But there are some ground rules. I mean, for example, you've got to have been doing comics for 10 years. It's not just, look, I did one independent comic I published out of my mom's basement. We just can't go there. So I'd like to go there. If I had billions of dollars, I would go there, but I don't have that money. So there are certain criteria you have to kind of pass or get through. But we're a little on the flexible side. Some of us more than others. But that's what the organization does. It's essentially there to try and help people in our profession who need help.
Well, we're definitely going to put a link in the episode description here. So, listener, if you want to know more about Heroes Initiative, if you want to donate yourself, if you want to help comic book artists, comic book people in the business, and if you want your contribution to add to the billions of dollars that Walt gets to give away to people that he would love to give away.
If only.
And if you can make it billions of dollars, that's even better, listener. If you can go ahead and help with that would be great. Yeah.
That would be awesome.
But with those billions of dollars, maybe, hey, to bring it back full circle, maybe we could go get one of those Supergirl first appearances that your mom threw in a can so much.
Well, if I find it somewhere in the house, we can send it and auction it off and raise some money for.
Oh my gosh, that would pay for a lot of medical bills.
That would pay for a lot of medical.
But thank you so much for spending so much time with us. Is there anything else? Do you want us to plug your social media? We'll link your Facebook in here.
Well, I was going to say, so you're going to tell me that the tape ran out an hour ago, right?
No. The tape ran out.
That's why we use Zoom. It's safe this way. Yeah.
So
I thought you put the reel in.
Oh, that's right.
Shit,
that's right. So, one of my roommates in college had a reel-to-reel tape deck that you could run 3 hours of stuff on it. So he played music a lot. I will say I have a minor social media presence. I'm on Facebook is the first one. I have a personal page where I really only friend people I know or cartoonists. Yeah. If I look at your page and I can't tell pretty quickly you're a cartoonist, I just go away because I don't have the time to spend trying to vet that stuff. But I will do that. I do also have the official Walter Simonson page on Facebook, which anybody can look at. It's just wide open. If you like it, you can see all the contents. Like I say, I have dozens of galleries on there, old stuff. I've got one dedicated to Middle Earth, where the first illustrations I ever did, where I read the text carefully and gathered reference and tried to figure out how stuff would work, were illustrations for The Lord of the Rings, my probably sophomore year in college. I did about 6 or 7 finished ink drawings. I'd learned to get away from rapidograph by then. My plan had been to illustrate the entire book. I haven't gotten very far in that endeavor, but I do have the drawings there, and I still have a Balrog that I prefer over any Balrog I've seen anybody do. So if you want to go look at the official assignment, Walter Simonson page, you can find that stuff. I have a lot of my covers. Everything that I've done, or a lot of stuff I've done, is up there right now. There is a Walt Simonson appreciation page on Facebook, which an English fan, he would be English with a name like the appreciation page, Oliver started before I was on Facebook. Very nice fan, good guy. He offered to take it down once I got on Facebook. I said, don't kid me. I just help yourself. If you can run a page I have nothing to do with, that's great. So they put up some stuff I don't put up. You see stuff on their page that I don't always put up, older stuff that I don't always have up. And then I'm on Twitter, although probably for not much longer. It's kind of gone in a direction I'm not such a big fan of. So I'm probably going to bail on that. But you can find my Twitter page and look back over a lot of old stuff. Mostly what I do on other social media is if I post a picture on Facebook, I go over and put it up on Twitter. Yeah. I put it up on Threads, and I put it up on Instagram. I don't do a lot of stuff on those platforms that I haven't done in Facebook. I don't put pictures up there I haven't gotten on Facebook. And the disadvantage, in a sense, for Twitter, with everything else, is your captions are short. Not like Facebook. I will tell sometimes, I know it's hard to believe, long stories about how stuff. So I try not to make it too long, but it'll be much longer than Twitter can handle. And I find cutting things apart and putting it in a bunch of responses too boring. So I just trim the captions down and do it that way. Instagram takes longer. They'll take most of the longer captions. Threads will take slightly longer captions. So those are the 4 places that you can find me. And if you want, you'll find a bunch of the drawings I've done. Sometimes I put up old stuff. Sometimes I just put up today or last night, maybe today. I did a Batman cover for Batman 153.
Yes, you did. That variant freaking rocks.
And well, thank you. And it's a little different from at least one guy on the appreciation page said, "Is this Walt Simonson?"
But it's so good, and I love your explanation of it too.
Apparently. So it was just, I was inspired by, we mentioned Fantasia earlier. I was inspired by Chernobog, who was the demon in Night on Bald Mountain. He doesn't have a name in the show, but that was the name they called him. And so it's my version of Batman as Chernobog, sort of. The ruler of the night of Gotham City. And Laura Martin did a really lovely job coloring it. That only, the image only came up on the web. I don't put stuff out before it's been released by the companies because I'd like them to hire me, in the future. So
True.
I saw that yesterday online and went, okay, this one's going up. So it did. But it was fun. So I do stuff like that. I've got some other covers floating around that haven't come up yet, but will come up down the road.
Well, I will plug some of those in our episode description. And I just got to say one last thing before we close out here. The amount of money that I would spend on a Walt Simonson Lord of the Rings graphic novel would be probably considered financially irresponsible. So I'm just saying that's out there. And
keep it in mind.
Thank you so much for the time. We're going to land our plane here. Everybody, if you're listening to this, you know where to find us on Instagram, Discord, Patreon. You know where to find all those things. We're worried about the links in your episode description today for Heroes Initiative and finding Walt on the internet. So as we say at the end of every episode, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you're going to be the rest of this week, no matter who you're going to talk to, all of that, whether you get to run into cool people like Walt Simonson this week, or you're stuck with me and Faz for the rest of the week, we just encourage you to do one thing, and that is to always stay worthy.